Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In, where we explore the intersection of occupation, education, and the everyday lives of families. I'm your host, Sarah Collins, occupational therapist and homeschool mom. And today we are diving into a topic that I get asked about all the time. How do you organize your homeschool day, especially with multiple ages and needs? So, whether you're brand new to homeschooling or you've been at this for a while but still feel like you're spinning your wheels, this episode is for you. We're going to go through your mindset. We're going to talk about the actual setup of the day. We're going to talk about adapting activities for multiple ages and abilities, and even give some sample activities. And stay tuned at the end for where you can get a downloadable printable to go through all of this with you. So though this may be common to some of you, because there are no two homeschools alike, I guarantee that you're going to find something helpful to you. So stick around, and here we go. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In, where we explore the intersection of occupation, education, and the everyday lives of families. I'm your host, Sarah Collins, occupational therapist and homeschool mom. And today we are diving into a topic that I get asked about all the time. How do you organize your homeschool day, especially with multiple ages and needs? So, whether you are brand new to homeschooling or you've been at this for a while but still feel like you're spinning your wheels, this episode is for you. We're going to go through your mindset. We're going to talk about the actual setup of the day. We're going to talk about adapting activities for multiple ages and abilities, and even give some sample activities. So though this may be more common to some theory because there are no two homeschools alike, I guarantee you're going to find something helpful to you. So stick around, and here we go. So as we think about setting up our homeschool days, we actually need to start with the mindset. Let's be honest. Do you ever lie awake at 3 a.m. thinking, am I doing enough? Because I know that I have done this. Or do you feel like one child is getting all of your attention while another is quietly disappearing into a Lego world? Well, first things first, grace, friends. You're not loved because of what you accomplish. You are not defined by a perfectly executed plan. You are a parent, a guide, a nurturer, and not a school superintendent. If our kids walk away with curiosity, compassion, and connection, then we've succeeded. But to nurture those values, we also need to get started with what we call the mindset, both for ourselves and for our children. And that's where Dr. Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset comes in. Dr. Dweck is a psychologist at Stanford University, and she defines growth mindset as the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed through dedication and hard work. This contrasts with a fixed mindset, which assumes that intelligence and talent are static traits. You either have or you don't. So when we approach homeschooling with a growth mindset, we would say mistakes are a part of learning. We might say struggling doesn't mean failure. It means that growth is happening. We might say you might not understand it yet, but you are capable of learning it. Or I can't do it this way. That yet and the this way are super powerful. In fact, so powerful that I have an entire video on what to do when your child says, I can't. I'll be sure it's linked in the show notes, and you can find it at homeschoolot.com/shop. But mindset also applies to us, the parents. If you've ever said, I'm not good at organizing or I can't teach math, try shifting that self talk. Like, I'm learning to organize in a way that works for our family, or I can get support or tools to help me to teach math more confidently. Having a growth mindset doesn't mean being relentlessly positive. It means believing that change is possible and that effort is meaningful and that setbacks and opportunities for feedback and not signs that you should give up. When we model this mindset, our kids internalize it too. They stop seeing themselves as bad at spelling or, quote, not a science person or even a bad sleeper. Instead, they start to view their brains as flexible and powerful and always a work in progress. You guys know that I absolutely love homeschooling, but just like every form of education, it is not without its downfalls. And one of the negatives is that our kids aren't in a classroom where they see others struggling with aspects throughout their day. They don't see Bobby asking questions about fractions, or they don't hear when Jenny struggles to sound out the word integrity, right? They tend to only hear us read to them or to teach them. And it's important that we make mistakes and then we simply correct them. Spill the milk, guys, or practice reading from the King James Version of the Bible. Goodness, you are going to struggle there. Misspell a word, cross it out, and then move along. I often talk about modeling, and modeling a growth mindset is not exempt from this. So before we get into the logistics of organizing our day, just know this: your mindset sets the tone. Homeschooling is not about controlling every outcome. Instead, it's about creating the kind of environment where learning is safe, mistakes are welcome, and growth is expected. Okay, so we're now thinking about ourselves and, our brains and making sure that we are modeling this growth mindset. We also, when we're considering the setup of our homeschool day, we need to understand development and also presume competence. Okay, let's move into how we view our learners and how that shapes everything else. And this is where this idea of presuming competence comes in. This principle, which is often used in inclusive education and neurodiversity affirming practices, helps us to start from a place of belief. Belief that our children, regardless of diagnosis, speech, ability, or even age, can think, learn, and understand. This idea is explored deeply in an article called Presuming Competence, written by Douglas Bicklin and Jamie Burke. Now I say Bicklin, but I don't actually know this gentleman, and it could be Bikelin. So if you are Douglas Bicklin, I apologize for your name. But the article is linked in the show notes. It is co-authored by an autistic student and a professor that was observing the student's preschool class. It's written 13 years after Douglas Bicklin, the professor, and Jamie, that autistic student, met. In their words, when people presume incompetence, they often create environments where learning can't take place. And unfortunately, this happens all the time, especially with students who are non-speaking autistic or who have intellectual or physical disabilities. We may unintentionally lower our expectations or use, quote, easier materials, even avoid certain conversations. But when we do this, we communicate, even without words, that we don't believe that this child is capable of more. So here's the thing: kids pick up on that. Jamie Burke, who is the student in this article, he described how having someone believe in his intelligence was transformative to him. Once his teachers presumed competence and offered communication supports, Jamie began to show that he had understood all along. In fact, the authors argue that presuming competence is even a civil right, because assuming incompetence has led to generations of learners being undereducated, underestimated, and unheard. And this doesn't just matter with our neurodivergent students. We can also think of this concept when we're teaching mixed ages. All right, so what does this look like practically in your homeschool? Let me give you a few examples here. Instead of not everyone will understand this book, so we'll skip read aloud, try include the child in read aloud time and offer a way to engage, like pointing to pictures or using a switch for a certain repetitive word. drawing something from the story, playing Legos while reading, like just having our kids present while we are working around or with our other kids. Another example of instead of she's not ready for this history lesson, let her listen in. Offer manipulatives, drawing along, give a chance to narrate back through pictures or even through body movements. Instead of he can't write, so he can't participate in this poetry exercise, try different ways. Let him dictate or use a keyboard or illustrate his poem. The Perfect Harmony Health blog puts it beautifully, and this one is also linked in the show notes. She says, when we presume competence, we make the environment accessible and presume understanding, not because we have proof, but because it is the most ethical and empowering stance that we can take. This, again, is not about being blindly optimistic, just like neither is our having a growth mindset, but instead it's creating a space where all children are invited to show what they know, not based on our assumptions, but on our opportunities. And here's the cool part, guys. When we presume competence, we often discover it. So as you plan your day and your lessons and your rhythm, start from that place of belief. Not what can this child do, but how can I make space for this child to show me what they know? Now, let's get practical. We've got this belief, we've got our mindset, we're presuming competence. Let's think about the daily routine. Instead of a strict schedule, consider more of a rhythm. This gives your day structure, but also flexibility. And in OT speak, we say predictability allows for flexibility. So a perfect example is in our days at home, I have this morning rhythm of waking. I have a quiet time to alert myself and to set my priorities. And I walk the dog, get myself ready. And by that point, my children are coming down and we make breakfast together while we start our morning time. Last week, I knew the plumber was coming sometime between 7:30 and 9, that lovely range. I couldn't walk the dog, I couldn't shower. My predictability was gone and I was having to be over flexible. I was trying to rearrange within the time limit, but these barriers, but it made it really difficult and I was exceptionally grumpy. It ended up that he came at 9, of course, when we were starting morning time and I was dirty and I was without my walk outside and our day was not off on the right foot because there was no predictability. It was over flexible. And another example, like a flip side, we typically move from our morning time to math, right? Here is the predictability here. We don't do the same thing every day for math. That's the flexibility. So yes, our curriculum is pretty typical. We do CTC math and my kids will just kind of move on and do their next lesson. But sometimes we also do math facts. They also work on visual processing and auditory processing through the Equipping Minds program. And there is an episode on Equipping Minds that I will link here in the show notes. It's episode number 53. So because they know that math is what's coming next, we're able to be flexible within that. So we've got this rhythm of predictability, which then allows for our flexibility. Here's the sample rhythm that we use. Now, guys, there are no two homeschools that are alike, and this is our rhythm that has worked at one point within our homeschool, not at the beginning, and actually it won't even next year when my daughter is in high school as her senior year and she's doing a lot of things outside of the homeschool through our community college. So this does have to change year by year based on my students' needs, but here's our general rhythm. We have a morning time together, which again starts around 9 o'clock. We do our hymn study, Bible reading, our memory work in there. We watch a current event show. Sometimes we alternate between CNN 10 or World Watch News or The World from A to Z with Carl Azuz. Then I do more of a loop schedule where it means like instead of every Monday we read poetry and every Tuesday we read Shakespeare, we have a short read aloud that we just loop the next day. Right? So if Monday we read Shakespeare and Tuesday we don't have morning time because we have the dentist appointment, on Wednesday we're just going to pick up with whatever that next one is in our loop. And I just keep them all in one bin. It's actually a rolling cart that I can move along. I'll put the picture in the show notes, but I just roll it into wherever we're going and I pick up the next book. And each year I change what's in there. For example, next year, my youngest son and I are going to be studying medieval history, and I found this really fun book on why did they wear that, to talk about the clothes throughout the history, and also one on the history of pirates. So put that in there too, because why not read a little excerpt from each of those? There's also things like our vocabulary study. We do Mad Libs one day, so they just kind of all rotate through. After our morning time, we have movement, right? Now, different families are going to require different things. In our house, we built this into chores right after our morning time because our kiddos have got to get up and move. And these chores that they do aren't just to help out, although that is an important piece, but instead we think about what my kids' bodies need. There was a time that one of my sons would be crawling along the floor and wiping a lot of the floorboards or washing the windows because he needed all of that proprioception through his core and his upper body to affect his handwriting. My daughter, for a time, was in charge of all the breakfast dishes because she needed to work some on her time management and executive functioning. If she didn't do it right away, right after our breakfast, then she got to do our lunch dishes too. Now, I will tell you that for a long time, I really thought that she just wasn't really good at time management and she kept having to do the lunch dishes until one day she told me, "No, Mom, I'm doing this on purpose so I can serve you." And guys, like what a beautiful way that she was able to contribute to our family and kind of speak my love language a little bit because I gave her that opportunity. So think about, what does your child need and how can that happen with movement during your day? After, that movement, and it would typically be whatever that they needed and how long that took, then we would move more into those skill-based subjects. So that's when I mentioned math earlier. They're usually independent with their CTC part. However, the other equipping minds piece that we were doing required help with me. And so we would go straight from morning time to this movement, and then we would all go right into math. My daughter would do some more of her things that she needed to do one-on-one, language arts, writing papers. She always had to do, more history. She had a lot more independent work being the oldest. Typically after that would be around the time for lunch. We would always do what we call a lit lunch, and we still do this to this day. Where, guys, this was not my original idea, although I cannot remember who to give credit for. But we call this a lit lunch, meaning that we would listen to literature, audiobooks, light a candle, and eat our lunch. And it always just calmed us down just enough, added some beauty to our day that would allow us then to refocus for the afternoon. After that, we would sometimes have more thematic subjects. If we were doing things together like science projects or art projects, things like that, we would do that at that point right after lunch. And then would be where my kids would have, their free time of whatever they wanted to do, or if they needed to figure out other independent work, because that's when I would come in to my office. And this is the only time of day that was really time related. At 3 o'clock, I would typically have clients. And so I couldn't just, follow this rhythm. That was the routine pieces that I needed to be done by 3 o'clock. Sometimes around 2:30 or so, I would feel myself really angsty of, am I going to finish this? Is there going to be enough time? And so my kids and I realized, if I, after lunch, could really get my one-on-one time with them done, if there was anything that we needed to do earlier and make it a positive thing, then I would feel less angsty. So my youngest son and I started doing what we would call like our seltzer water time. We would both go get a seltzer water and we would work on spelling there. It was a time of connection just for the two of us. And instead of being like, it's time for spelling, I would be like, hey, I'm going to go down and get our seltzer water. Do you want to meet me on the couch? So he had a really great transition, and it was a little bit earlier, but able to make it so that I would feel more calm. Then after, we would do this evening shuffle of who needs to be where. And this is another time of day where I kind of struggled, switching from getting all of my work done, having dinner, and getting back out the door has required a lot of family help. My husband often comes home and does the cooking, or my daughter, and we would have to talk about this beforehand. Like, how can we make this happen so that everybody in our family is able to get to be where they need to be? So, this would often be requiring of a weekly meeting or a daily schedule update, a rundown of all of this to keep us all predictable so that we could have some flexibility within there. Hey listeners, we're going to take a quick break from our chat, but I have something super special to share with you. If you've been loving the stories and strategies that we talk about each week, you're going to want to check out our brand new book, co-authored by me and Jackie Adrian, called A Chameleon Tale, A Colorful Sensory Story. It's the perfect resource for anyone navigating the beautiful and sometimes challenging world of sensory needs and neurodiversity with their kiddos. Our book follows Sally and Seth, two adorable chameleons on their journey to the Chameleon Cafe, highlighting how every family member's sensory experience can be unique. Not only is it gorgeously illustrated by Jackie, seriously, these chameleons are so cute. But it's also designed as a meaningful conversation tool that you can use with your child to help them recognize and express what's going on inside their bodies. Imagine having a story that you can read together where your child can say, "Hey, I feel like Seth today. I need a," and then list one of the compensation strategies that Seth uses. And for parents, it's a way to give your children a language to talk about their feelings and their bodies. Plus, you'll find ideas for regulation strategies to try together. The book is available for order right now. Yes, right now. You can find A Chameleon Tale on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can request it at your favorite local bookstore or find it and its free book guide at homeschoolot.com/a-chameleon-tale. So support two mama authors, grow your family's emotional toolbox, and get a beautiful keepsake for your bookshelf. Order today and review it, and let's keep changing lives, one story at a time. Now, back to the episode. Welcome back. All right, you guys, you have heard my routine or my rhythm for the day. And again, remember, this has changed frequently over the years. So this was just a great example, but it does include mixed ages. So the subjects might be the same. I talked about how we would do history together in our morning time together, but the goals were very different. So let me break this down a little bit. Like when my kids were toddlers, when we would all be together for our morning time, their job was to just be present. I would offer them different activities like coloring or blocks or snacks or water play while they were in there. My preschoolers, as my child would get a little bit older, I would ask questions and sometimes see like if they could answer too, or be like, "What do you think about this?" And it would absolutely be amazing. The memory work that he could remember and some of the drawings that he would do. And he would be like, show me a picture of a person that would just have like a head, and the arms coming out of the head. Remember that? But 9 times out of 10, going along with this presumed competency, it would have something to do with at least a little piece of what we were listening to or reading. In early elementary years is when we started with more of the short narrations. When we would be doing maps, with my older kids, he would trace or just do blob maps, just kind of circle an area, draw other things to go along. In the upper elementary years, those narrations turned more into full sentences with deeper connections across different studies or different subjects. Middle school, adding in some more note-taking or research or some project ownership. And then for high schoolers, like this last year, as we were reading through American history, I also had my daughter write a paper, research a person in our family and what their time, when they were alive and what history had to do with our perceptions of them. For example, she researched my grandfather who was in World War II and learned all about the places where he was because it was more important for her. It was more applicable because he was in our family. So everyone has a place within this and everyone contributes. Again, the goals are different. But let's think about these babies and preschoolers a little bit. I'm going to dive in more for that because yes, it is hard to homeschool when a toddler is trying to flush Legos or the baby only naps for 20 minutes. And I've been there on both of those. So here are just a few tricks and tips for that. One, Start your day by filling their cup. A snuggle, a story, a sensory bin that could go a long way. But I will tell you, I am an OT and I'm giving you permission that if sensory bins are not your thing, that is a-okay. I once, when my daughter was one, I thought that she was going to really love a sensory bin filled with lentils. And I gave her lentils and I gave her a little dump truck and a spoon and stuff like that. So to, quote unquote, keep her busy while I was cooking. And what she did was take that dump truck and that spoon and make a slingshot and throw those lentils all over my kitchen to the point that my husband called it Lentilgate. And when we sold that house 4 years later, we were still finding little lentils in the back of cabinets. So I never did that again. Unless we were outside, there was not a sensory bin. However, I would provide tubes. You can get those from Michael's that would have, different shapes or different characters or different animals that might go along with whatever it is that we're reading about because it would be novel and it would give me some way to be creative. And so I would give her those tubes or give my boys at that point the tubes with like Play-Doh or with kinetic sand, so it was something new, but also not going to turn into a big giant mess. Now, high chairs, pack and plays, baby wearing, those are all great options as well. And remember, we need yes spaces because we do want babies and toddlers to be able to move. So there would be frequently times where we would be upstairs, like in one room that also had, mattress to jump on or, a spot where my babies could move around more. I also did every day what I called bath math, where I would put my toddlers in the bath and fill it up just a little bit with water. And we would be in the bathroom to do math. And my older kids would write on the mirror. They thought it was a great fun thing that they're writing, and my little guys were contained. Another option could be busy boxes, rotating quiet toys or stickers or lacing cards or anything like that in a bin that is only for that time. Or audiobooks with pictures. This is way later. I was not around for the Yodo boxes or any of that, but I know that there are families that use that quite a bit, and I think that is fantastic. Strategic media use too, guys, like save your screen time for the key moments when you need one-on-one time with an older kid. Now let's think a little bit more about our older kiddos, because we want to make sure that we are leading with curiosity as we're setting up this day. Curiosity is more important than covering every single standard. And Carrie McDonald, in her book Unschooling, says we don't need to train kids for the jobs of the future. We need to stop training the curiosity out of them. So to spark that wonder, think about taking field trips or exploring nature, asking weird questions to them. There's a mnemonic device called Cowlicks that I would always use when going to a field trip. So the C stands for counting, O for observation, W for words, L for letters, I for imagination, C for K for kinesthetic movement, and S for sensory connections. So counting would be something like, how many of the sheep do you see in there? Or let's look at this art. How many butterflies are behind me in this picture? Observation would be something about the other senses. What do you smell? What can you touch? What do you hear right now where you are? Words could be if I saw any sign or something and I could have them try to read, and then they could also point out letters. Sometimes we would play I Spy with that too, like I spy the letter L. Imagination, especially at an art museum, I would be like, can you show me with your body what that would look like? Or can you imagine standing in that river? Comparison could be something like, look at these two pictures next to each other and what do you notice? Or how are they the same and how are they different? You could use this obviously in an art museum, but think about in a science museum too. Or if you're going, on a nature walk or you're outside at a zoo, like what's the difference in this animal and the one next to it? How do you feel? Is this one cold? Because in the last one, we felt really hot, right? We can compare those together. The kinesthetic movement, especially at a zoo. Can you show me that animal? Walk like that jaguar, right? Can you hang like that sloth? And then the last one, and cowlicks, was the sensory connections. So this does kind of go along with the observation, like what do you see, feel, hear, touch, but I would try to relate it to when else have you felt that? Or when else have you smelled this? Right? Or how does this make your body feel? Always trying to turn back into, I notice the smell in this reptile room and it makes me feel uncomfortable, right? So always trying to put that back into how does my body's reaction with this. So if we are bringing out this wonder, we can kind of carry that over within our own homeschool day, especially if we are communicating and connecting. So if you can talk about like how the brain works with your kids and celebrate their own strengths and normalize their struggle, that's the foundation for everything. Where we're modeling learning and frustration and then modeling the repair, like after we have that frustration. Again, let me say that again. Connection is the foundation for everything. Because to foster independence, we must first invite this dependence. Let your children know that you are there and that they belong and that their work, whatever it comes from or whatever form that it takes, it matters. This is where you are putting in that connection to make them know that they have a place where they belong. You're giving them the roots. So, guys, what does it look like to organize your homeschool day? I gave you so much information in this, but the main things are that you start with a relationship and we want to presume their confidence and really have our mindset set so that we know that we are going to be growing and developing every single day. We're going to follow a rhythm and not a bell schedule, except for the things that are set on time because of others outside of your home, making appointments, things like that. Of course, then we need to adhere to this schedule, but the majority of the time, just the rhythm to allow that predictability. We can teach multiple ages within one area, but remember that their goals are different for that time. That way, we can let go of this perfection and trust the curiosity. We can build in the play and the movement and the real life all together. So, homeschooling, guys, it looks like you showing up with some predictability that will allow for that flexibility. It means that your homeschool is not going to look like mine or everybody else's because there are not two homeschools alike. There's not two homeschools that have the same environment, that have the same number of kids, that have the same goals and desires. But you don't have to do it all, and you definitely don't have to do it alone. Guys, remember, homeschooling is not alone schooling because the OT is always in. If you listen to this episode thinking, well, this all sounds great, but I need help actually putting it into practice, I've got you. I created a free homeschool day planning guide just for you. It includes a printable daily rhythm template, checklist for multi-age planning, and my favorite prompts for encouraging a growth mindset and presuming competence at home. It's totally free and it's designed to take the stress out of structuring your day without chaining you to a very rigid schedule. So download it at homeschoolot.com/shop or click the link in the show notes. Let's get you organized, confident, and connected starting today. Remember, homeschooling is not alone schooling because the OT is in.